You are now jumping into part 2 of the EOS for Recruiting episode with Derek. If you have not listened to part 1 yet, go back and listen to part 1 before you dive into part 2. Enjoy.
Welcome to the Elite Recruiter Podcast with your host, Benjamin Mena, where we focus on what it takes to win in the recruiting game. We cover it all from sales, marketing, mindset, money, leadership, and placements.
Admin is a massive waste of time. That's why there's Atlas, the AI-first recruitment platform built for modern agencies. It doesn't only track resumes and calls. It remembers everything, every email, every interview, every conversation, instantly searchable, always available. And now it's entering a whole new era. With Atlas 2.0, you can ask anything and it delivers. With Magic Search, you speak and it listens. It finds the right candidates using real conversations, not simply looking for keywords. Atlas 2.0 also makes business development easier than ever. With opportunities, you can track, manage, and grow client relationships powered by generative AI and built right into your workflow. Need insights? Custom dashboards give you total visibility over your pipeline. And that's not theory. Atlas customers have reported up to 41% EBITDA growth and an 85% increase in monthly billings after adopting the platform. No admin, no silos, no lost info, nothing but faster shortlists, better hires, and more time to focus on what actually drives revenue. Atlas is your personal AI partner for modern recruiting. Don't miss the future of recruitment. Get started with Atlas today and unlock your exclusive listener offer at recruitwithatlas.com.
So another part of the EOS process I know is, you're going to laugh at this, process. How often do you walk into a staffing or recruiting firm and there's no real processes?
Yeah, every time. I'm joking. I'm joking. A lot of times, and even like the process is there. That the truth is every team has a process. What often happens is it's either outdated, meaning like they created some really exhaustive SOPs at one point in time and nobody ever went back and updated them and nobody ever reads them, or it's just in someone's head or in multiple people's heads. So I think documentation is a problem and nobody wants to do it because they feel like it's just this exhaustive task. The exhaustive task is not in defining and drafting the process. That usually can be done in an hour or less. The effort comes in training and maintaining. That's the thing is you need to become a training company. You should always be training. Always be training. You've got to say something 7 times for people to hear it and absorb it for the first time. Sometimes it's 15 times, right? It's fascinating. My son is probably 500 times, right? So inserting a little fun and jokes in here. But at the end of the day, like processes is the work that's not sexy, that's not fun, but it's everything that matters in a business. And if you have no process, you could have the best amazing people in the world, but they're going to kind of drive you nuts. Because when you're trying to get your arms around it, you don't know who's doing what, and it's not consistent, and your brand can take a hit, your reputation can take a hit. It is critical that teams get processed down.
Yeah, I mean, it was one of those things because I've worked in recruiting firms. I have my own recruiting firm. I talk to a lot of recruiting firms, and I feel like so much of the knowledge is almost like this institutional knowledge that is transferred via you sitting next to me.
Yeah, 100% shadowing, right? And I believe in it. I think it's critical. But are they training to what's in the process? And I'm not saying create a bunch of documents for document's sake. Like the document can be super simple. It could be a workflow graphic on one page. The work comes in like, do we actually do the things that are on the page, right? So if you have a 5-step sales process, okay, 7-step, whatever, it's 2 pages in length. It gives you enough to describe who, what, when, why, how, where. Okay, simple journalism rules. If it gives you that information, and as long as we understand that every time you're, in the sales process, you check every box off along the way, great. Do you care about every ounce of minutia in an entrepreneurial company? I don't, because that's going to drive you nuts. And you're not striving for perfection. You're striving to be like 80% good. Because 100% is super unlikely. It's utopia and so much changes. And we just implemented a new system. We just inserted this automation tool. We just went with this AI chatbot. We just improved this, change out this measurable, whatever. Give me a million other reasons. Now you just said, okay, well, now we have to change the process. Every time you make a change, you have to update the process. So if you have a Bible, if you have a 75-page SOP on how to recruit in your business, you're toast. Nobody's updating that. right? And no one's reading it either, right? I hate to break the news to the person who put that together and they love it. Nobody's reading it nowadays.
I host some summits, and I try to have the summits like at least 4 times throughout the year, maybe an extra on the side, just because I understand the I think it was from like the Aerotech days or like some other sales conferences where everybody starts running like low at about the 90-day mark.
Mm.
It looks like EOS, a huge part of it is traction, and it's broken down into like 90-day blocks. Why is that?
It's because most people can't focus for longer than 90 days. The wheels start coming off. And in an entrepreneurial business, a lot of things change. Just had a conversation yesterday with a client about like, hey, we were working on this rock, and then all of a sudden it kind of changed in the middle of it. Well, tell me why, right? Was it a valid reason, or is it just because? So point being around all of that is the 90-day world is critical because we know that most people can like put their minds to something for 90 days. And if you have a 1-year goal, okay, of implementing an ATS, okay, it's real simple elementary, and we're doing it at Lingo, moving to Bullhorn. So that was a 1-year goal, get on Bullhorn, right? Implement, go live. I can plan 90-day increments, okay, and hopefully lead and guide and steer and help project manage that thing to life. But guess what happens? Business, life, issues, priorities, maybe a big cash flow problem hits you in the face, right? Maybe COVID happened. And so you're allowing yourself the freedom to almost work in an agile environment where you're going to stay laser focused on this for 90 days to create the right level of focus and priorities for the team, for the company, for the individual. That's how we're going to become high executioners, right? Highly disciplined, laser focused on getting things done, right? And then that next 90 days comes around, you reset and you say, okay, what are the right priorities for this particular quarter? Okay, well, we got to have another Bullhorn rock, right? Rock is just another word for a priority, but we got to have another Bullhorn rock to get us to the next stage so we don't miss our go live date at the end of the year. Okay, cool. What can we do in 90 days there? Now, this is also not a fair example because Bullhorn and other very large organizations that do this, that have really lengthy project life cycles, are really good at planning projects for the most part, right? We don't need to talk about the horrors of implementing an ATS on this podcast, but stuff happens. And guess what? Sometimes the schedule gets disrupted. So I had this great plan. All of a sudden, the project just got delayed 2 months because of whatever reason. Well, now your rock may shift and pivot that next quarter because of it. So instead of trying to like be hardcore laser focused and manage for something for 12 months from January to December 31st, well, now we're just going to plan it 90-day chunks. Okay. And I'm going to agree with the team that you just told me that you're going to do this very specific thing within 90 days. Now I'm going to hold you accountable to hitting it. So the 90-day world is to provide a level of, I don't want to say freedom, but a level of clarity on what is the right focus for that particular 90-day window.
I love that, but you opened up this new question for me. We have like the scorecard, the checklist, which I guess are to-dos, but then you threw in this rock thing. Like, what the hell's the difference between these things?
Yeah.
Like, for somebody listening, like I have a rock on my desk. Actually, I had one. Now it's gone. I'm looking for it. I'm like...
Yeah, so that is a great question. Oftentimes this will come up with new teams beginning to implement EOS as they start to get confused when you're throwing a lot at them, right? You're asking them to start to implement, a handful of tools in a very short period of time. And, at the end of the day, there are issues in every business. And there's a time and a place that we ask teams to work on those issues called a level 10 meeting. That's part of the traction component, the meeting pulse. And from solving your issues, right, in a week-to-week basis, once you've solved it, you generally have created a to-do or 2 or 3 to solve it. Okay, so an issue is I have something to share, FYI, letting you guys know that I'm doing something about my issue. Great, you get a question or 2. Now we're going to give you a to-do. You've got a true problem, and we're going to apply this issue solving track IDS methodology to solving that issue. Cool. What ends up resulting is we just worked through something for 25 minutes. We got to the root cause. We shared our facts and experiences. And now we decided on the best course of action, which is going to result in a to-do or 2 or 3. And then you have like brainstorm issues that are just like, I've got an idea. What do you guys think? Let's throw it on the table. Good, bad, or ugly. Let's go or not go. Okay, cool. So the result of all three of those common issues that I just gave you are these things called to-dos. To-dos in an EOS world are 7-day action items. Okay. Super important priorities to solve. I got 3 to-dos out of my weekly team meeting, and I know that I've got to solve and do these to-dos because next week my manager, my leader, is going to ask me if I got those done or not done. So to-dos are 7-day action items that arise from solving your issues. Okay. So issue, to-do.
So like moving into a new ATS isn't an issue.
So that's a great question. And it, yes, can start as, let's just say it started as an issue. Our ATS software isn't doing it for us anymore. I don't like it. I put it on the issues list. Should we move to new ATS? That's a pretty big, hairy conversation and decision. So I'm going to park that on my long-term issues list. So there's a difference between short-term issues that we're going to solve week to week and long-term issues that we're going to talk about maybe once a quarter because they require more time, more brain power, more output, right? So yeah, it could start as an issue, 1,000%. And then what happens from it, in this case, I parked it on my long-term issues list. I now have my quarterly planning session or quarterly strategy session with my leadership team. And we decided in that meeting that we are going to move ATSs. So now what do I do with it? Well, now it's become a rock. It has become a 90-day priority, right, to make a decision and select the right ATS. And then what happens from there, if we decide and we select, another rock's going to ensue from it. And then eventually a year-long goal is going to be created to get on there. So I'm blending a lot of things together, but there is a thing that we call compartmentalization in EOS. And compartmentalizing your long-term 12-month priorities are goals. Your 90-day priorities are rocks, right? Your 7-day action items are to-dos, and everything else in your business is an issue. And right, the short-term and long-term compartmentalization there of weekly, short-term, right? Not weekly, big, hairy, but on long-term. So that's how we try to simplify it for teams, to show them like, team, this isn't overly difficult. What compartment doesn't fix in? But many times, Ben, to your point, yes, they do start off as issues. And now we have different choices in how we solve them.
I love that. I got a question before we jump over to another part of the podcast.
Sure.
The vision thing, vision. Let's talk about what you guys do with a vision.
Yeah. So the vision component, right, consists of 8 questions. Just it. That's it. No 50-page strategic plan, no McKinsey consultants coming in to put something together that you'll never look at again because it's so overwhelming. But it is really answering 8 simple questions and then sharing that message consistently. Remember, 7 times, right? So every quarter we share it, every new hire hears it. Sometimes you go over it in the interview process, and there's just various other times where maybe you have issues in your business, right, where you're pulling it up to look at it. But it is really your vision and plan for the company. And EOS uses a term called the Vision Traction Organizer, or VTO for short. And it's a simple 2-page document, or online in several softwares now that have been built to help teams really enhance their EOS experience. But it is a 2-page plan, right, that answers, number one, where the heck, who are we as a company, right? What are our core values? What is our guiding principles here at Lingo Staffing? And so you answer that with, what are our core values? We put them on there. You define what's the name and what's the definition. So it's crystal clear as to what it means to be a good family member, good cultural fit at our organization. The next question is, what do you want to be? What's your purpose, right? And so purpose, passion, or cause, right? Pick one you love. And then what's your niche or your niche? What do you want to be laser focused on? And you're trying to create guardrails, because we know that most entrepreneurial teams, especially visionaries, get really excited about all these other things. And they're light industrial staffing. They're like, hey, I got this opportunity to get into healthcare. Let's tack that on. And you're like, wait a minute, is it admin? Or is it clinical? And they're like, yeah, it's clinical. Okay, cool. Let's do that. No, that's a horrible idea. Super distracting. We don't know how to do this. We know nothing about per diem nursing. We know nothing about credentialing. It would be a really bad idea for us to all of a sudden go into medical staffing. So don't do it. Or we should get into PEO. Well, I don't know anything about a PEO. So why would we do that right now? Let's park that and think about that next year, or start an offshoot company, but keep it out of mind. So you're creating your reason for being, your why, and then your what. And then your third question on the VTO is like, where are we going, right? So like your 10-year target. And sometimes people can't think that big, so they come up with a 5-year target or a core target to really help guide like every decision you make every single quarter, every issue you solve needs to align with your reason for being, your core focus, right? And your 10-year target. So this is aligned to who we are to make this decision. And does it align with where we're going? So we're deciding by implementing Bullhorn and making that decision that that's going to help us get to our 10-year target faster, right? For example. So we're making decisions with these things in mind, and that's how we use it as a practical tool. And then you're like, well, how do I do it? How do I get there? Well, you've got to have a marketing strategy, right? You got to know what your target market looks like, your ideal client profile, and you got to know what the message is that you put into the market, right? So what are we good at? What are our uniques, right? What's our proven process? What's our guarantee? You put all that together, and then all of a sudden, your marketing strategy comes to life through that, right? Your actual strategy, not the simple strategy we put together, comes to life through that. And then, okay, cool. That's the first half. Now you got your 3-year picture. So to get to 10 years, right, to be a $150 million staffing company and we're 40 million, how do we do that? Well, let's plot 3 years in advance and say by this date, we need to be here, revenue, profit, measurables, and we need to accomplish these 5 to 15 things to help us get there. Okay. And from there, if we've done that, the leadership team's all on the same page, they're seeing the same organization. And now you can create clarity and build a really crisp, clear 1-year plan from it. Okay. So 1 year from now, we need to be here, revenue, profit, measurables. And then here's the 5 goals that we're going to work on to help us achieve this 3-year picture. And then you just take that 1-year plan, you break it down to rocks. Okay. What is our quarterly plan? You do the same thing, just breaking it down more granular. And then the last question on the VTO is what are issues? And you put your long-term issues there. And you're like, why would I put my issues list on our like strategy? And I sarcastically say it's because you got to put it somewhere, right? You got to get these big things out of your head and park it somewhere. So those big long-term hairy issues, like should we implement an ATS? You're saying we don't have time for that right now. We can't focus on that. So go put that on our plan so we can talk about it at the right time and not forget it. Make sense?
Makes sense. And I feel like this almost does a few different things. Like, first of all, it puts guardrails on the ADHD visionary.
Yeah. Yeah.
For those listening, he just rolled his eyes. But also, how often do you start working with a company and they have this idea, this goal and vision, but it's not really put together?
I would say, and again, we know, EOS Worldwide has done a ton of, research on this over the years, 20 plus years of data at this point, but they know that most of the time it's in someone's head, right? That vision and plan, it's in the leadership team's head and commonly in the owner, the visionary's head. And now you're just trying to extract it to create transparency and clarity, because again, go back to the beginning of our discussion about why I left the government. I was just this cog in the wheel of whatever we were doing and not seeing any improvements or how this actually fit into the grand vision and plan. So if we use that example and fast forward to creating this thing called a BTO, you're extracting all these ideas because the head of sales might want this, but the owner wants that. The owner, who is a sales guy, thinks that sales should be done this way. The head of sales thinks it should be done that way, right? So it creates a lot of clarity and alignment for the leadership team. And now you can impart that wonderful vision and plan to the entire organization and say, hey, recruiting team, hey, sales team, hey, back office team, this is how you guys all fit in this grander vision and plan. We need every single one of you to help us get from 40 to 150, right? And here's exactly how we're going to do it. And here's exactly how you're going to play a part. So if I've got a company goal of launching Bullhorn by the end of the year, guess what? I'm going to tell them how each one of them are going to play a part in it. Whether that be through requirements gathering, workflowing and workshopping, what the new tool should look like, testing, right? Being a trainer potentially for it, building process for it, et cetera, et cetera. Now I'm bringing them into it so they feel like, wow, we're actually doing something to help this organization get to where it wants to go versus just put another person in a seat, get another person out billing, make another sale for a job order.
Do you see EOS different with staffing versus retained search or like direct search or direct placement?
The tools know. What becomes interesting when you start dealing with permanent placement organizations or direct hire or search firms is that sometimes they're created and look a lot like a partnership, So if you think of like an accounting firm or a law firm, right? They're siloed into managing partners, into partners who have their own book of business and they're supposed to be the relationship person, the salesperson, the delivery person for their book of business. And sometimes search firms can look very similar to that. So it becomes a little nuanced on how you build the accountability chart around, what does this leadership team look like? Is it a bunch of, people who are sales and ops for their particular book of business, right? Maybe it's IT, maybe it's accounting, finance, maybe it's healthcare, right? And you've got like 3 main verticals for your search firm. And the head of each one of those verticals is really like the integrator for each particular vertical and responsible for the whole thing. So I think the accountability chart can be different, right? This isn't black and white, but the tools remain the same, right? The tools are the tools. The L10s, the rocks, the scorecards, all that stuff is applied the same. It's just the vernacular might be different. What's important might be different, but none of that changes.
The Recruiter Sales and Business Development Summit is coming back. It is kicking off January 26, 2026. It is going to be the best, biggest, most focused conference for recruiters to help them grow with business development and sales. Remember, with all the summits, the live sessions are free. If you want to go for the replays, you got 2 options. You can go VIP on the summit platform, or you can join the community and have access to all the summits. But this is a summit that you do not want to miss. If you want 2026 to be the absolute best year possible, be there, be ready to learn, and be ready to crush it. I'll see you there.
When does EOS not work? Or when should a company not even look at doing EOS?
Well, I would say, the stock answer is that it works really well for organizations that are, 10 to 250 employees. And so again, remember, our target market is entrepreneurial companies. And so, you're thinking, why wouldn't I do this for a $10,000, regional bank that's publicly traded? A couple of reasons, right? They've already kind of figured it out. They have these tools already in place. Do they do them well? Maybe, maybe not. But EOS is gaining traction, not to play on the word too much, with larger organizations that might be 1,000 or 5,000 people. But it works really, really well for smaller organizations. Going into an organization that's 2 people, that's kind of hard to implement EOS. You could take a couple tools and put them to play 1,000%, and they'll do wonders for your company. But like the full tool set at a startup type of organization, there's so much chaos in a startup, and it's kind of got to be that way. So it really is difficult in that mode for a period of time. So once you start to get to 10 plus employees, you really can start using these tools. You have a semblance of a leadership team. Maybe there's 2 or 3 of you. And then I think you can scale from there. So that's the target market for who it works for. Owners are frustrated, right? They have people issues. They're not getting anywhere. They're not growing. There's no profit, right? They're angry, frustrated, whatever it might be. They just want to live a better life and not work 80 hours a week pulling their hair out. So those are like right fit organizations. When doesn't it work? It doesn't not necessarily work for a 2-person company. My smallest client had 3 people. It worked well. In Cascade 5 years later, they're doing awesome now. But they didn't use the full tool set. They only used a few tools that really mattered and worked for them. But when doesn't it work well is when you have a really weak integrator, right? The person charged with running the day-to-day business. It doesn't work well with teams that are lying to themselves. It doesn't work well when the leadership team isn't highly accountable, doesn't trust each other, never gets things done. Like Rock's completion is always horrible. They never hit their financial goals. Like that's when it doesn't work. And usually if we can pull it back far enough, it's usually a bunch of people issues, right? You don't have the right people in the right seats at that level to actually know and do what they need to do.
We're talking about all these concepts, these toolbox processes, like components. Like if somebody wanted to actually implement this, like how long does it typically take to implement?
What we tell prospective clients is that it takes 24 months. The process is built, the EOS process is built to take 24 months. And that would be 5 sessions a year, right? And there's time in between where there's coaching conversations, there's help you need to do with your client and all that kind of stuff. But what you're ultimately looking at and working with someone is saying a 2-year journey. That's what we like, a mental commitment to this 2-year process. And look, sometimes, it's not for them and they quit 3 sessions later, or they got everything they needed in 18 months and you graduate them and they're good to go. So some can go faster and they pick it up so much faster, and then they're good. They want to graduate and do it on their own. And then some clients stay on for life. And you've been working with the same company for 5 years, and they love the fact that you come in and bring that value to them every quarter to help them work through their issues, and they'll help them build a great plan for the next quarter or the next year.
So what is it like to work with an implementer? Because I feel like this is just kind of like in the same situation where you brought in an implementer. This is kind of hard to pull off by yourself.
It's extremely hard, but there are teams that do it and do it well, and we call those self-implementing companies. So for every EOS, every company that works with an EOS implementer, let's say the number of self-implementing companies is 10x that number. If there are 850 certified EOS implementers like myself, right? And let's say we're working with 20,000 companies, right? Helping them implement EOS, multiply that 20,000 times 10 for the amount of companies out there doing it on their own. And what generally happens is they're using subsets of the tools, or maybe they had somebody, a buddy, some consultant they knew that knew enough about EOS that could teach them components, or they just picked and chose like, hey, I want to learn how to run an effective meeting, so we're going to run L10s and we're going to do rocks. That happens for sure. But how do you work with an EOS implementer, right, is more about, we serve three purposes: teacher, facilitator, coach. And right, teaching all the EOS concepts and how to practically implement them in your business. Like, remember, the implementer's job isn't to actually do the implementation. It's the team's job to take all that wisdom, knowledge, tool set, and actually put it to work in their business. We work with the leadership teams to, right, it's like train the trainer type of concept. Because if I do all the work for you, if I teach you the tools and then they say, well, hey, can you actually do this for us? Can you teach our teams level 10s? Can you help our teams assign rocks? And yeah, I can certainly help you do that and implement at a lower level for you, but you're creating dependency. And we teach independence, right? We're teaching you to really buy into these concepts so that you ultimately do want to graduate. You ultimately do want to run this on your own. So how do I work with the team? 5 sessions a year in the room, roll up our sleeves. I'm teaching tools, right? Facilitating the session, right? That's like 15% of the work is facilitation, but ultimately you're there to guide a common answer and get them to where they need to be and help them solve their issues and build an amazing action plan that they can walk out of the room with a great vision plan for the quarter, for the year. And you're doing that. Like I said, there's a foundational series that you do up front. That's a lot of hard work in the first 60 days. And then it's every quarter thereafter for about 2 years, sometimes longer, sometimes shorter.
Awesome. I know we covered a ton today. And before we jump over to the next part of the podcast, is there anything that you want to go deeper on within EOS that I didn't know to ask them?
No, and I love the free flowing concept because we kind of jumped around the entire model. There's a very specific pitch that I have for this, but we jumped around and covered really everything in some way, shape, or form. So I'm good with it being very informal that way. And I think anything at this point might be diminishing returns for the listeners.
Well, so the next part is the quick fire questions, and they don't need to be quick answers. So
Sure.
it's just a podcast separator. So I love that you've been in the staffing world completely separate from the staffing world. You're hiring recruiters, you're working with new recruiters. If you have a recruiter, let's say next week, walks into your office and with everything you know, sits down and asks you the question, like, how can I have a successful career here? What piece of advice would you give them?
If anybody did ask that question, I'd applaud them, number one, for, being courageous enough to ask and curious enough. And usually if somebody's asking that question, they probably have a high motor and, kind of a get shit done attitude. So I love that. And I wish more people would ask a question like it. My next question would be, how much money do you want to make? Because usually recruiters and salespeople want to make money, right? They're commission-based roles for the most part. Not every organization is designed that way, but for the most part there is. So like, okay, well, how much money do you want to make? And do you really want to work at it? Because generally it's not something you can just kind of sit around and get lucky. Like, you've got to get to work. And so on the sales side, it's like, are you willing to roll up your sleeves and do more than the minimum? So if our minimum requirement is for you to do 100 calls a week, are you going to do 150? Are you going to do 200? Are you going to stop at 97? And so my very real next question is like, what do you want to make and how hard do you want to work? Because I'm going to share the good, bad, and the ugly about the reality of it. And sales sucks because you get told no so many freaking times. And so you got to build thick skin. Like, can you take criticism? Can you take feedback? So I try to be very open with teams on both the sales and recruitment side when I get to talk to them about again, I really try to scare people off if I'm involved in the interview process, to head those things off, to say like, okay, if you come here and I really scared you, like that means you typically want to work and you're ready to work.
Love that. Second question is, we're going to change this to firm owners. You're at a conference, a firm owner recognizes you like, hey, you're the staffing EOS guy. I know you can't narrow everything down to one piece of advice, but we're thinking about implementing EOS. If you could narrow it down to one piece of advice, what would it be?
Maybe advice or a question, but are you ready for change? Are you ready to disrupt your organization? Because any change is a disruption. I've worked with good clients. I've worked with bad clients. I think we all have. I've worked with clients just for the money, or it wasn't the best relationship. It was very transactional. It didn't feel the best, but we got the work done. And I really want to work with companies that really love this work and they want to do it. And so for me, I would say, like, that's great. Let's talk. But are you ready for change? You can usually see when they are and when they aren't. There's a lot of lip service, but the proof's in the pudding pretty quickly if they're willing to start to make changes, because what you find is often excuses. Like, oh, we can't hire this person because I can't let this person, because we can't do that yet, because there's a lot of excuses versus you got to start somewhere. So take one of the 7 things and do something with one. So I always ask, are you ready for change? Because it's going to be painful. And the team you have now might not be the team you have in 2 years. Is that okay? And if that's not, let's not waste our time. But if it is, let's talk.
Has there been a book that's had a huge impact on your career outside of Traction?
I'll probably go way off the deep end here and just say, the Bible obviously has had a profound impact on my life and still does, but I won't get spiritual with you right now. But it's just a book filled with a ton of wisdom. But I'd say, in a more practical sense for what you're looking for, I think the book Radical Candor is wonderful, by Kim Scott, and Facebook executive and all this. And it's just about how to have a really hard conversation, right? Because what ultimately happens is a lot of stuff doesn't happen in business because lack of trust. This goes back to Patrick Lencioni's teaching, and he's written amazing books. 5 Dysfunctions of a Team is one of them, and I teach it every annual session with a client. But this idea that you can challenge personally, right? And you can still love on that person, basically. So you can show that you care and challenge them directly. And that's a tough thing to learn how to do, is you can be a real big giant, what to somebody to try and get the most out of them. But that only works for a small period of time, right? It's not a long-term solution of just beating on somebody in a negative way. But if you can show this person that I really do care about you and I care about your success, but I'm also going to be very direct with you when things aren't working or with what I need you to do or whatever. So Radical Candor is a great book. There's another book really quick called Who Not How, written by Dan Sullivan. Great book. Stop trying to figure out how and find the who's, right? You don't have to be the expert in everything. Find the who that is the person that knows it. Anyways, I'll keep going, so I'll stop.
Favorite tech tool that you love at the moment?
I'm starting to get into it. The Super Grok is pretty cool. It's got a PhD level in every single topic you ask. So that's been pretty cool. Our company did just implement a software called Ringover. It's a phone system, right? But it integrates with the ATS, does some really cool stuff. Obviously, we do automation, but we are implementing, as soon as we get on Bullhorn next month, we're implementing their product called Amplify, which is AI, and really starts to take over a lot of the recruitment processes. So we haven't done it yet, but seeing demos, super excited about getting the company on that platform.
Awesome. So you didn't have a recruiting background, but you ended up now in the executive seat of multiple, 2 recruiting companies. You've now helped implement EOS at 40 different recruiting companies. If you could literally go back in time and have a cup of coffee with yourself 1 month into that first job, the first job in this staffing world, this chaotic world, what would you sit down and tell yourself?
I would tell myself, let me just see if I can pull this off for you. But, I ask first. I have a sticky note above my computer here that reminds me to ask more questions than make more statements and be more curious. And that leads into really diving into understanding at the desk level sooner in my career. So if I had spent more time really understanding the how-tos of recruiting, sales and recruiting, and sat at the level, if you think about like the undercover CEO or whatever the hell that show used to be, of like do the work, I would have done that at the beginning of my staffing career. Actually go out on sales drops, do sales myself, recruit the people. That's the one thing I probably, I don't have a lot, I don't regret. I don't think it's healthy to do that. Made mistakes, sure, learn lessons, sure, but that's one thing I would go back and tell myself to do.
Love that. So I know that you've been around the staffing role now. People know you. People like ask you questions. But I'm sure you get the questions like, how do you implement EOS, of course? Like, what do I do? Like,
Sure.
blah, blah, blah. What about this? Like, what the scorecard? Like, all these questions that you get from recruiters, salespeople, firm owners. Is there a question that you wish they would actually ask you, but they never do?
I think you stole it a little bit with the previous question about a new hire coming in. But what my answer, I can't articulate the question as much as the answer I would give. And the answer I would give is, how do I do all this? How do I solve all this? How do I get from A to Z or A to B? I heard something really profound probably 6, 8 weeks ago, listening to a podcast on a morning run. And it was a spiritual podcast, and the articulation to business or sports or anything in life, to be successful, you have to fall in love with the process. So think about it in a sports analogy. If you want to become the best free throw shooter in the NBA, you've got to shoot 1,000 free throws a day. So you're falling in love with the process of doing the thing that's going to make you great. And so what I wish they would ask is, how can I do this? And for whatever specific category that they're asking that question, to me, it's simply just, again, fall in love with the process and actually do it. Because if you don't love it, you won't do it. Right. And if you don't love it, you shouldn't do it. And you're not going to be successful long term. So it's really understanding and then, okay, so how do I do this? But I really think about sales, about recruiting, it is just like love the process and do it, even for long-term recruiters or long-term successful salespeople. So new people, it's about fall in love with the process, do the process. It will work, I promise you. For enhanced and advanced people, it's improve the process so it works even better for you. I'll hear, well, I'm an amazing recruiter. It takes me less interviews to subs, less subs to placements. Cool. Great. Then why aren't you doing more? Why aren't you doing more? Well, I'm making 120 a year or 150 a year. I'm cool. Okay. Why aren't you doing more? Like, do you want to make 250 a year? Because you could. If you put in the same output as a new person who's learning, you'd make 250 a year. Isn't that appealing to you? So like really starting to get people to think that way, because I hear that all the time. Well, their metrics need to be different, or their measurables or the KPIs. Why? Well, because it takes them less. I don't care. They have the same, and their output's going to be higher, way higher. So to me, I think it's fall in love with the process and then enhance the process. So I know that doesn't exactly answer your question, but I'm trying to find a way to weave that in, because it's been like my thing lately, is to impart that on people, is the importance is falling in love. And if you don't, it's not going to be happening for you.
I love this. Well, I got 2 questions before I let you go, Derek. First of all, if somebody wants to follow you, how do they go about doing that?
Probably the biggest thing for me would be LinkedIn. I try to be fairly active, post a couple of times a week, like, share, all that fun stuff. But I'd say LinkedIn's probably the number one thing. I do have an EOS website. They could certainly find me there too. Those would be the 2 best places to find me.
And before I let you go, is there anything else you want to share with the listeners?
I'm kind of spent and mentally exhausted right now. But yeah, Ben, this has been great. I hope you can see it. I don't know if the video will be shown and it's more just audio, but I hope people can see or feel like the passion I have around not just staffing, but EOS in general, and really just wanting to help people like put good out in the world and help them, and great things come back to everybody.
Well, Derek, I just want to say thank you so much for coming on. I found it absolutely incredible when you told me the story that you ended up in this space because you fired a client and they lost $5 million in revenue, which is just, I love how that was the gateway. But one of the reasons why I actually reached out and wanted to have this conversation is because staffing, recruiting is just chaos. We're dealing with people. Most of the time it's chaos behind the scenes, but I've seen through these interviews a few organizations that implemented EOS and they've had exponential growth, 5 to 25 million, 500K to 3 million. Like I've watched the growth happen behind the scenes. And so I wanted to get a chance for people to understand what it looks like and how it could be implemented. So Derek, thank you so much for sharing. And for the listeners, we are coming close to the tail end of 2025. Put everything in for the rest of the year. This is your chance to crush your goals. But the most important thing this last quarter does, it sets you up for the entire 2026. So make your dreams happen, work hard, let's grow together.
Admin is a massive waste of time. That's why there's Atlas, the AI first recruitment platform built for modern agencies. It doesn't only track resumes and calls. It remembers everything, every email, every interview, every conversation, instantly searchable, always available. And now it's entering a whole new era. With Atlas 2.0, you can ask anything and it delivers. With Magic Search, you speak and it listens. It finds the right candidates using real conversations, not simply looking for keywords. Atlas 2.0 also makes business development easier than ever. With opportunities, you can track, manage, and grow client relationships powered by generative AI and built right into your workflow. Need insights? Custom dashboards give you total visibility over your pipeline. And that's not theory. Atlas customers have reported up to 41% EBITDA growth and an 85% increase in monthly billings after adopting the platform. No admin, no silos, no lost info, nothing but faster shortlists, better hires, and more time to focus on what actually drives revenue. Atlas is your personal AI partner for modern recruiting. Don't miss the future of recruitment. Get started with Atlas today and unlock your exclusive listener offer at recruitwithatlas.com.